to be our speaker, our final speaker today. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I want to say first how impressed I am by JFJFP and its involvement with the boat, because, and of course our captain, because if you know that the American Jews have been organizing a boat for the last 6 months, and for the last 6 months they've been collecting money. This is America, of course. That's what they do. They collect money. They collected so much money they could buy 10 boats or 7 boats, and they're still not sending the boat, and you've done it within such a short time. And so well. So that's thank you for doing that on behalf of all of us. That is one of the reasons why I wanted to come and speak to you, because I think this is an important organization. It's an organization which is on the cusp of a number of groups in British Jewry, and as such it is much more influential than the Israelis think or hope, and we know this, and I think this is good news. Now, I want to first of all say how much I agreed with the arguments made by Ephraim. And it's really interesting that, I'm here in the minority of Israeli Jews in this hall. But it's interesting that the Israeli minority is actually arguing not for a Jewish state. And that, I think, is quite, indicative of what we have learned from being citizens of what has become a racist state. I want to disagree with one of the things that you said, Ephraim, and that is that there's nothing wrong with Zionism in principle, but the practice has, in a sense, tainted it. So this is like, it was a good dream, but it has become a nightmare through what they have done. Well, I really do not think that this is 100% correct. In 1896, Herzl, in his diaries, of course not in the publications that have come out, like, the Jewish state, Judenstaat, he doesn't write about it like that at all. But in the privacy of his diaries, in June 1896, he's giving us the plan for what will happen when Zionism will take over Palestine. And he says the first thing that will happen is that what he calls the paupers, the poor people of Palestine, meaning the Palestinians, of course, the only people that are poor there, will be transferred, and this is where the word transfer actually comes from, will be transferred lock, stock, and barrel to what he calls the transfer countries, which is what was at the time called Transjordan, or later on was called Transjordan, which is that area on the other side of the Jordan Valley, and Syria and Lebanon and anywhere that will take them, basically. But it was a foregone conclusion for the creator and founder of political Zionism that Jews will not live with others. Otherwise, why are they leaving Europe? They're leaving Europe because, according to him, and his limited experience of anti-Semitism, thankfully, that Jews cannot live with others. And therefore, from the very precepts and from the very early stages of Zionism, the plan was, behind closed doors, in the diaries, in talks between Herzl and other people, with a nod and a wink, we'll get rid of those bloody Palestinians, or Arabs, or whatever you call them, paupers, it doesn't matter. There was never a plan to live with the majority of that population in the land of Palestine. So that's a disturbing thought for anyone like me, whose whole family was destroyed by racism and Nazism, that I found myself growing up in a country that is based on racist ideas and racist beliefs. Now, I agree with Ephraim on another point, though we disagree on this one. We agree with him on another point, which is the dichotomy presented between one and two states is wrong. It sounds sometimes, especially if you read the material that came to us before the meeting, for the best of reasons, of course, it sounds sometimes as if we're sitting in a restaurant and Mr. Obama comes with a card and says, would you like a one-state solution, a two-state solution, a three-state solution? What kind of sauce would you like with it? And actually, you know, we'll just say, oh, Mr. Obama, we want a two-state solution with milk and honey on top, or something like that. Well, what is this? This is a nonsense situation. The only solutions that end up being accepted by populations are the solutions that are left on the table when all the others have disappeared. They fell off the table. Look at Yugoslavia, or ex-Yugoslavia. Look at Northern Ireland. Look at South Africa. And then you see that basically the white population of South Africa would never, never, never in a million years accept a democracy which allowed black people and white people to live together in equality. And I'm not for a moment saying that South Africa now, after '93, is this paradise on earth. It is not. But at least on paper, at least in principle, at least by intention of at least Mandela and the ANC, this was to be an equal society. There's a long way to go towards an equal society in South Africa. But at least on paper, that would never be accepted. And I think Arthur is right. Israel would not accept, never will accept, willingly a solution that will give equality to everyone in the country of Palestine. But in those countries, it wasn't to do with what this white South Africans will accept. It was to do with the conflict between enormous pressure from the whole world in the end. And you will remember, because some of you I remember from the AA, and we fought, millions of people fought along the ANC to make sure that this dream will happen. And so it wasn't the question of what the South African whites will accept. They had to accept. And if you remember, de Klerk and Botha and people like that realized, hang on a minute, so that we don't lose anything, let's give up something. Or in the words of Tomasi di Lampedusa, so that everything stays the same, everything will have to change. And that's what happened in South Africa. And so this has happened, in a sense, in Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is not an ideal society now, far from it. But is it now not better than it was? That they are not killing each other, but actually the real problems now is how do we actually share power? And how do we work together to improve the society? And actually, a financial crisis is a great thing, because then you have some other problems rather than, Catholic versus Protestant. So there are positive sides to this. Now, I want to tell you a little story from 1967. I was a young officer in Golani, in the very, since then, an army unit that has been tainted by much violence and terrible brutality. And we fought in the Golan Heights. And after the war, there was a briefing in the Northern Command, and all the hoi polloi, Rabin and everyone were there, as a Weizmann, etc. And they debriefed us, or whatever you call it. In Hebrew, it's slightly different. In Hebrew, it's learning from the experience, yeah. And what was really interesting is this was 2 weeks after the war. And the younger officers were, not myself, but the younger officers were like, oh, this is good. The older officers were a bit more, balanced, and they said, look, they'll kick us out of those territories as they did in 1956. In 1956, Israel took over the Sinai, And within 6 months, the Americans and Russians together, the Americans and the Soviets, correction, the Americans and Soviets came together for the first and last time, saying to Israel, either you're out or we're moving the missiles in your direction. And Israel had to go. And so did, of course, the British and the French. So the idea in Israel in 1967, immediately following the war, in circles slightly more intelligent than the 20-year-olds like myself, was they will move us out. They would not allow Israel to control those territories for any length of time. So we got weeks, maybe months, based on the experience in 1956. Rabin said, hang on a minute, we have plans. I can't talk about them, but we are now planning for not moving out of those territories. And people wanted to know what, and he said, you will find out. Don't worry about it. Time will tell. There will be no secret. But now we can't talk about it. Not even in this military conclave where not a word gets out. I cannot talk about this. And of course, we have found out. You have found out. The world has found out. The plan was, and still is, to make it impossible to have a two-state solution. This is what they were worried about all along. And indeed, to speak about this two-state solution, to have links with Palestinians was illegal. So the two-state solution is not happening because it couldn't have happened. It could have happened. If in 1967, Israel said, we will move out of those territories in those conditions, and the Arab countries, because Palestine was not an entity, would persuade the Palestinians and together would come together and say what they did in 2002, yeah? Do you remember the Saudi peace proposal? If the two sides talked like that, there would have been a two-state solution. Now, Ephraim has told you very accurately and I think convincingly why it wouldn't have worked anyway. Because all the things that he said will still be true. But at least the Palestinians would have 22% of their country. 22% of the country. Now imagine